It's Thursday afternoon. You've been awake since 6 a.m. You've answered emails, switched between 3 different projects, scrolled past 100 things that needed your attention, made decisions about dinner while on a work call, tried to remember if you moved the laundry, and somewhere in the middle of all that, you forgot to eat lunch until 3 p.m. You are not lazy. You are not weak. You are not doing it wrong. But you are absolutely bone-deep exhausted. And the strangest part? You can't even point to what tired you out. Nothing dramatic happened today. There was no crisis, no emergency, no single enormous task that drained you. It was just everything, all at once, all day long. 1,000 small demands arriving from every direction with no order, no sequence, no rest between them. Now here's the question nobody is asking out loud. Why didn't your grandmother feel this way? Because she didn't. Not like this. The 1950s housewife is easy to mock or romanticize depending on your politics. She's been flattened into a caricature, the smiling woman in the apron, spotless house, pearls at the kitchen sink. People either hold her up as an impossible ideal or dismiss her as a symbol of oppression. But somewhere between those two reactions, we've missed something genuinely worth understanding. She managed a full household. She cooked 3 meals from scratch. She cleaned, organized, managed children, maintained social relationships, and kept everything running. And by most accounts, she had energy left over at the end of the day. Not always, not perfectly, but structurally, she was not collapsing every Thursday afternoon wondering what was wrong with her. Why was it so different? The answer isn't that her life was easier. It wasn't. She had no dishwasher, often no dryer, no microwave, no grocery delivery, no pre-made anything. She couldn't order out when she was tired. She couldn't push the work to tomorrow without real consequences for her family. The answer is simple. It was rhythm. She didn't have a to-do list. She had a rhythm. And that is an entirely different thing. One that modern life has almost completely destroyed. And one that might be the single most underrated source of sustainable daily energy that exists. This isn't a nostalgic argument. It's not a political one. It's something much more practical than you might think. There is a biological and psychological reason why living with rhythm costs less energy than living without it. And understanding that reason might be the most useful thing you read this week. Before we go any further, we need to make a distinction that most productivity advice completely ignores. There is a profound difference between a schedule and a rhythm, and confusing the two is part of why modern life feels so grinding. A schedule is a list of things assigned to time slots. It lives in your calendar. It has to be checked, maintained, renegotiated, and remembered. A schedule requires you to make decisions constantly. What's on it, what to move, what to add, what to cut. A schedule is a system you manage. A rhythm is different. A rhythm is a sequence of actions that flows naturally, one into the next, until the pattern itself becomes the guide. A rhythm doesn't need to be remembered the same way a schedule does, because eventually it doesn't require conscious thought at all. The body and the mind simply know what comes next. Think about a piece of music. A schedule would be a list of notes written on paper. A rhythm is what happens when those notes are played in sequence until the musician no longer has to read the page. The music simply moves through them. This distinction matters enormously when we talk about energy. Because here's what neuroscience now confirms. Every decision you make costs energy. Not metaphorically, literally. The process of deciding, weighing options, choosing, committing, depletes the same cognitive resources as focused thinking. It's called decision fatigue, and it is real, measurable, and cumulative throughout the day. Modern life is a decision factory. From the moment you wake up, you are making micro decisions constantly. What to do first, what to eat, what to respond to, which notification matters, whether to do the laundry now or later, whether to answer that message before or after you finish the thing you're working on, whether to take a break or push through, what to make for dinner, how to sequence your afternoon. None of these feel like big decisions. That's the trap. They feel small, even trivial. But the brain does not distinguish between a small decision and a large one in terms of the energy it costs to make. The machinery is the same. And when you make dozens of these micro decisions before noon, you have already spent a portion of your daily cognitive budget before the real work of your life has even begun. The 1950s housewife was protected from this, not by having fewer responsibilities, but by having a rhythm that pre-decided most of her day for her. Monday was laundry day. That was not a decision she made Monday morning. It was simply Monday. Tuesday was ironing. Wednesday was mending and marketing. Thursday was deep cleaning. Friday was baking. These weren't arbitrary. They followed a logic built around the natural cycles of a household, the drying time of laundry, the freshness of bread, the flow of the week, and because they were fixed, she never spent a single calorie of mental energy deciding what to do next. She simply did what the rhythm said. This is not the same as mindless routine. It's something more sophisticated. It's the outsourcing of sequencing decisions to a pre-established pattern which frees the mind to be fully present in whatever task is actually happening right now. That presence, that ability to be fully in one thing, is itself energizing. Not immediately, perhaps, but over the course of a day, and certainly over the course of a week, it is the difference between arriving at Thursday, depleted, and arriving with something left. Flow is the state of effortless engagement where energy feels self-replenishing. A key prerequisite is knowing what you're doing next. Uncertainty blocks flow. Interruption destroys it. The 1950s housewife had something that makes flow accessible. She almost always knew what she was doing next. The rhythm told her. That's an enormous energetic advantage. Contrast that with modern reality. An amorphous list of tasks with no fixed sequence. We discover that total freedom is not energizing, it's exhausting. Because total freedom brings total responsibility for deciding, moment to moment, what the right thing to do is. We traded rhythm for flexibility, and we're paying for it every Thursday. So what was this rhythm concretely? Let's reconstruct it. Not to prescribe it, but to understand the architecture beneath it. Because hidden inside the specific tasks is a structural logic that has nothing to do with the 1950s, and everything to do with how human energy actually works across a day. The 1950s household day was organized roughly into 4 natural blocks. Not by design, not because someone read a productivity book, but because the tasks themselves demanded it, and because centuries of domestic tradition had already figured out, empirically, what order worked. The morning block, launch and tend. The morning was for activation, getting the household and its people into motion. Breakfast was not an afterthought grabbed while checking a phone. It was an anchor. The act of preparing food, serving it at a table, clearing and washing up afterward. This was a sequence of concrete, physical, immediately visible tasks that gave the morning shape. There was a beginning and an end. That completeness matters more than it sounds. After the family left, the morning continued with bed making, straightening, whatever the day's primary task was. The morning was physical, active, and sequential. One thing led to the next by the logic of the work itself. What this provided energetically, a sense of momentum and accomplishment before the day's cognitive demands fully arrived. The body was warm, the hands had done things, and there was already visible evidence of progress. This is not trivial. Psychologists call this small wins, the neurological lift from completing tasks, however simple, that compounds through the day into sustained motivation. The modern morning, by contrast, often begins with the most cognitively overwhelming thing imaginable. A phone full of other people's demands before you've even made your bed. The mid-morning block, the primary work. The mid-morning, roughly 9 a.m. to noon, was when the primary task of the day happened. The laundry was washed and hung, the deep cleaning was done, the bread was made. Whatever the day's main domestic work was, it happened here, in a sustained, uninterrupted block of focused effort. This aligns almost perfectly with what chronobiologists now understand about the human energy cycle. Most people, with some variation for night owls, experience their peak cognitive and physical energy in the late morning. The body temperature is rising, cortisol has peaked, alertness is at its highest. The 1950s rhythm, without any reference to biology, had stumbled onto placing the hardest, most demanding work exactly when the body was best equipped to do it. And crucially, it was one thing, not several things. Not the laundry, and also the phone calls, and also starting dinner prep, and also an errand, and also a quick email. The mid-morning had a primary task, and the housewife did it until it was done, or until the time block ended naturally. The psychological term for this is monotasking, and it is the opposite of what modern life demands. Context switching, moving between tasks before either is complete, has been shown in study after study to dramatically reduce efficiency and increase mental fatigue. Every time you switch contexts, your brain has to reload the new task's parameters, shut down the previous one, and recalibrate. That process costs time and energy every single time. Modern workers switch tasks on average every few minutes. The cumulative cost is staggering. The 1950s housewife, constrained by the nature of her work, was largely protected from context switching. You cannot leave a load of laundry half-washed. You cannot half-make bread and come back to it after checking your notifications. The tasks themselves enforced completion and continuity. That enforcement, which might feel like a constraint, was actually a form of cognitive protection. The afternoon block, maintenance and transition. After the midday meal, which was itself an important structural break, a real stop, a real rest, the afternoon shifted in character. This was not the time for primary work. This was the time for lighter maintenance, mending, errands, correspondence, preparing for the evening. Energy was naturally lower in the early to mid-afternoon. The post-lunch dip is a real circadian phenomenon, not laziness. And the tasks of the afternoon matched that lower energy. This matching of task intensity to natural energy levels is something modern life almost never allows. We expect the same output at 2 p.m. that we expected at 10 a.m. We schedule important meetings at 3 p.m. We push through the afternoon dip with caffeine instead of respecting it as a signal from the body that lighter work is appropriate right now. The afternoon was also, critically, a time of transition, a bridge between the day's primary work and the evening's different demands. Dinner preparation began in the afternoon, not in a last-minute panic at 5:30 p.m. This meant the evening meal was not a source of stress, but simply the continuation of an already underway process. This matters emotionally as much as practically. The modern 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. window, often the most chaotic hours of the day, everyone arriving home at once, dinner needing to appear from nowhere, children needing attention, the day's unfinished business creating background anxiety, is partly a product of not having bridged the afternoon properly. The 1950s rhythm built the bridge in advance. The evening block, closure and restoration. The evening had a different quality entirely, and this might be the most important structural difference of all. Once the dinner was made, served, and cleared, and these were communal activities, done together, not alone, the day's productive work was over, not paused, not continuing in the background while half attention went to family. Over. The evening was for restoration, family time, leisure, social visits, simple crafts or hobbies, and eventually, early sleep. And it was bounded. There was a clear line between the working part of the day and the restoring part, and once you crossed it, you did not cross back. Modern evenings almost never have this. The laptop comes to the couch. The phone sits on the dinner table. Work continues past dinner in the form of emails answered and messages sent and to-do lists reviewed and worried over. There is no line between work and rest, which means the nervous system never fully transitions into the parasympathetic state required for genuine restoration. Sleep, which is the most powerful energy-restoring mechanism available to a human being, is not simply a function of lying down. It requires a preceding wind-down, a period of low stimulation, low demand, low light, that allows the nervous system to shift gears. The 1950s evening, with its natural dimming as darkness fell, its domestic rhythms of quieting down, its absence of screens, provided this wind-down structurally. Modern evenings, with bright screens until the moment of sleep, systematic overstimulation, and the persistent background hum of unfinished work actively sabotage it. So, when the 1950s housewife woke the next morning feeling rested, it wasn't luck. It was the downstream effect of an evening that actually restored her. Her mornings had energy because her nights had been genuinely structurally restorative. The 4 blocks together created something more than an efficient schedule. They created a complete daily cycle: activation, primary work, maintenance, restoration, that matched the natural rhythm of human energy with the demands of daily life. Not perfectly, not without difficulty, but structurally, in ways that accumulated over days and weeks into sustainable, reliable energy. Here is where we have to be honest about something. You cannot copy the 1950s housewife's day. You don't have her constraints, her social context, her relationship to domestic work, her absence of professional obligations. Or if you have those obligations, you have a fundamentally different set of demands on your time. The specifics of her rhythm do not transfer, but the architecture beneath the specifics does. The 4-block structure, the principle of matching task intensity to natural energy levels, the protection of a primary work block from interruption and context switching, the midday real break, the afternoon bridge, the bounded evening with a genuine line between work and restoration. These are not 1950s inventions. They are adaptations to how human biology actually works. They predate the 1950s by centuries, and the reason they show up in pre-industrial domestic life is not cultural, it's functional. They worked. They produced sustainable energy, and any version of them adapted to your actual life will work for the same reason. So here is what this can look like practically. Not as a rigid prescription, but as a framework for rebuilding rhythm where it has been lost. Name your 4 blocks, not in terms of what fills them, but in terms of their energetic character. What is your activation block? The part of your morning that gets you into motion with visible, completable tasks before the day's cognitive demands arrive? What is your primary work block? The uninterrupted window where your most demanding, most important work happens, protected from context switching. What is your maintenance and transition block? Lighter, administrative, preparatory work that bridges toward evening. And what is your restoration block? And critically, where is the line that marks its beginning, and what does it mean that the line is real? Assign tasks to blocks, not to time slots. This is the difference between schedule and rhythm. Rather than saying emails at 9:15 a.m., say emails belong to the maintenance block. Rather than deep work from 10 to 12, say primary work belongs in the morning block when my energy peaks. The block becomes the container. Specific times can flex within it while preserving the rhythm. Protect the primary block with the same seriousness the 1950s housewife protected her mid-morning. She did not answer the door during laundry or start conversations that couldn't be finished. She was unavailable. Your primary work block deserves that same protection and deliberate enforcement. The modern environment is aggressively designed to interrupt you. Reclaim your rhythm. Take the midday break as if it matters, because it does. Not a working lunch, not eating at the desk. A real stop, a real meal, a genuine transition between the morning's intensity and the afternoon's different demand. This is not indulgence. It is the mechanism by which the afternoon is possible at all. The 1950s housewife did not skip lunch to be more productive. She ate, she rested briefly, she began again. The brief stop made the continuation sustainable. Respect the afternoon dip as information rather than failure. When energy drops in the early afternoon, the modern response is to fight it with more coffee and more willpower. The older response was to assign lighter work to that window. Both the coffee approach and the task-matching approach produce an afternoon, but one produces it through depletion and the other through alignment. Over a week, the difference in cumulative energy is significant. Make the evening line real. This may be the hardest part and the most important. The 1950s evening line was enforced by technology. There were no work communications arriving after dinner because there was no mechanism for them. You have to enforce the line yourself now, which requires a decision and the daily renewal of that decision. But the principle is not optional if you want genuine restoration. At some point in the evening, the working day must end, not pause. End. The nervous system needs to know that what comes next is not more demands, and it needs enough time in that state to do the restorative work that sleep then completes. Build the rhythm before you need it. The mistake most people make when they try to implement a rhythm is waiting until they're already exhausted to begin. But a rhythm is not a recovery strategy. It's a prevention strategy. It doesn't rescue you from depletion. it prevents the depletion from accumulating, which means it takes several days of consistent practice before you feel its effect. And in those first days, when you don't yet feel different, the temptation to abandon it is high. The 1950s housewife didn't decide each Monday whether to do the laundry or not. The decision was already made. The repetition was the point. Rhythm requires repetition before it becomes self-sustaining. Understand that the exhaustion you're feeling is not a personal failing. This is perhaps the most important thing in this entire piece. The tiredness you feel on Thursday afternoon is not a character flaw. It is not evidence that you're not cut out for your life. It is the predictable, structural result of living without rhythm in an environment specifically designed to destroy it. An environment of infinite context, switching, decision abundance, constant interruption, and evenings that never properly end. The 1950s housewife had energy not because she was stronger, but because the structure of her day protected it. That structure did the work that willpower is now expected to do, and willpower runs out. The good news is that rhythm can be rebuilt. The architecture is available to anyone who decides to build it. The 1950s is not coming back, but the biology that made its rhythms work hasn't changed at all. Your nervous system still needs activation in the morning and restoration in the evening. Your cognitive resources are finite and depleted by decision-making. Your energy still peaks and dips. The rhythm your grandmother lived was a response to those facts. Facts as true today as they were 70 years ago. The problem isn't you, it's that you lost the rhythm. And that's something you can find again.